Hello everyone, this is, as always, First Web Designer, and I am James Richman. And, you've been submitting so many questions, as always, and, I have to pick only one per episode, And today I have chosen to pick one of your questions that goes along the lines of, how to stand out as a web designer. And as always, I promised a little while ago, I'm not going to answer these questions on my own anymore. Because, I'm not one of those I know it all guys, as much as I would love to be one. Every episode I invite one of the experts about a particular topic. And so today's expert is called Dorie Clark. She's written quite a few books. But the real reason why I have chosen her for this particular episode is because her book is called exactly that, Stand Out. Hello, Yellow, Dorie.
Hey, how's it going, James?
Yeah, I'm doing great. And actually, when I just said hello, Yellow, I realized that your book actually is nice, bright, and yellow.
That's
Hopefully,
right. That's part of the standout strategy. Exactly. When you can be yellow, you might as well.
that's it. Yeah. So during the episode, perhaps there'll be a chance that you can let our viewers know where they can find the book, and so they will see themselves how much it really stands out. And perhaps I have to ask you, where did it all start? How did you decide that you got to stand out? There's no way you're going to blend in with the crowd.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so for me, the origin of the book was that the first book that I did was called Reinventing You, and that was about professional reinvention. People who want to change careers, or they want to change jobs, or they want to change somehow how other people think of them, and all those things are really important, and a lot of people are facing those issues. But I realized that that was only half the battle, because once you get to the place you want to be, once you get that job, or you find that career that you really care about and are passionate about, then the question becomes, how do you get known and respected in that field? And so I really thought that was an important part too. And I wanted to write Stand Out to help people understand how they could do that and really thrive in the fields and careers they've chosen for themselves.
And so I have to admit, I haven't read the book yet. I know you actually literally just now finished your book tour, so hopefully there will be a chance for me at some point to get my hands on it. But so how applicable the information is in the book, or is it more sort of theory?
No, I really wanted to make it very hands-on. What I did in the book was I interviewed about 50 top thought leaders in a variety of different fields. And I used to be a journalist, and so I was very interested in their stories, especially the fact that I think too often in our society, when we're talking about success, we either go one of two ways. One way is people are treated as though they've always been famous and they've always been successful. And so it's like this unchanging fact of life. Or the alternative narrative is that suddenly someone's on the scene and oh my gosh, they're an overnight sensation. But we don't see anything in between. And so consequently, it's really hard for people to figure out what the mechanics are by which someone becomes well known. And as a result, a lot of times people say, well, geez, that might, work for some special kind of person, but I'm just a regular person. I'm never going to be, famous. And the point isn't that people have to become famous. But I think the point is increasingly, particularly if you are a web designer, you have to give people some reason to work with you. There's always these days going to be a lower priced option. And so you need to make sure that there is something interesting and distinctive about you and your offering so that people say, you know what, even if he's not the cheapest, he's the one for me. He's the best. And that is where standout comes into play.
Yeah, okay. So really good examples, as well as those that you mentioned, that people that we know are famous. They were not born famous. Some have, there are situations where they're born to rich parents, but it's not the majority, and hence we have
Fortunately,
this.
Prince William is not a web designer, so no competition there.
That's it. And no, but still, there is competition even if you pick a niche. That's one of the things we teach. Don't create websites for everyone. Just pick, say, book authors. But clearly, there will be another book author, for instance, and few more book authors. So picking a niche is important, but it's not it. It's not end of the road. So maybe you can share some applicable ways how to stand out. Maybe get your personality across or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a smorgasbord of different options that people can use. I mean, what I discovered more than anything in talking to these experts, and some of them may be familiar to your viewers, if particularly if they like business literature. I interviewed Seth Godin, who's a well-known marketer, David Allen, who's very famous in the productivity world for his getting things done methodology, people like that. But what I discovered is there's not one path to becoming a recognized expert. There's really a set of choices or a set of options, and so people can find the one that feels best to them, that feels most applicable. One of them, as you said, is in fact pursuing a niche strategy where you get really well known for one narrow thing, and then you build out strategically. So, maybe you pick book authors. Oh, I'm going to be the go-to web designer for book authors, and then from there you move into, okay, I'm going to be the go-to web designer for creative people of all types. So it could be book authors, it could be musicians, it could be whoever, but it's about expanding it incrementally. But there's plenty of other possibilities as well. One strategy that actually has been very successful, and I think is underutilized, is when people do research and use that as a driver in terms of building their brand. So one example is the website OkCupid. There are a lot of dating and romance sites out there. Why would OkCupid stand out? Well, it turns out that one of the early things they did was, as a dating site, they compiled a lot of information, a lot of data about what was popular, what wasn't, and why. And so they used an inbound content marketing strategy to write blog posts talking about some of their findings about love and romance, some of which became hugely successful, hugely viral, and raised the profile for free of OkCupid in a very substantial way.
Wow, yeah, this is it. Content creation. Everyone is. What was the term? I forgot the term. Where basically every one of us in these days could be our own journalist. Can't remember the term. What it was called. That we don't have to give the power only to media. You can make an
Yeah,
impact. You can stand out by creating content.
exactly.
But still, I guess I have stumbled upon some, not so successful stories where by trying to stand out, the brand has been damaged. In fact, because you want to stand out so bad that you sometimes steer controversy or touch very sensitive topics. So maybe some tips on what sort of things to avoid. As hungry as you are to stand out, there are some things I guess you should avoid.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where I think having a clear understanding of who you are as a person and who your brand identity, for your company is, because you don't want. I mean, sure, controversy sells, but you don't want to seek it out just for the sake of controversy. It's nobody wants to hire somebody that's like a bomb thrower. If controversy follows naturally based on you just putting your stake in the ground and saying, you know what, I believe in equal rights, and so I'm never going to work for anybody, if they oppose gay marriage or something like that. Well, that's a controversial decision, but it's one that's rooted in who you are. Or you could do a funny one. You could say, you know what, I'm a soccer fan, a football fan, and so I'm a Manchester United person, and so if you're a Barca fan, well, too bad. I'm not going to work for you. I mean, you could do it, whatever you want. Maybe it's that you are a Drupal person and you say, you know what, screw you, WordPress. I'm just not going to do it. People might ask for that, but that it's drawing your line in the sand is fine as long as you are comfortable with the consequences of doing it and it is true to you. But if you are making decisions just for the sake of, oh, what's trendy, what'll get me press, then that usually backfires.
Yeah, okay. This is actually how that's actually one of the best advices that I've heard. Just look at who you really are, what you believe in, what are your passions, and what sort of causes you're ready to fight for, and sort of tie it together. But
Yeah.
that would be perhaps mainly possible if you are, personal brand, a freelancer. But quite a few people of our audience, they have agency, they have teams,
Yeah.
so they don't represent the company, the work they do as an individual, but as a company. So what's the
hmm
difference between standing out as an individual and as a company?
Yeah. So if you are working within the confines of a company, I mean, it's a little trickier. I mean, presumably, in most cases, I'm guessing that hopefully you're aligned enough that your company isn't doing work that you are egregiously opposed to. But it becomes a sort of subtler art. What can you do that stands out yet also fits into the overall zeitgeist of your company in such a way that people don't look at you and say, "What are you doing here? This doesn't make any sense." But there's small ways to do it. I mean, it could be any. And again, if it's contrived, if it's people doing it just for the sake of attention, that's not going to work. People can see through that. But if it's just a question of being you, great. I mean, maybe your thing is, you dress a little differently. Maybe you're the guy with the funky socks. Or there's a business speaker that I know named Scott Stratton who makes a really big point of it. And he has, in fact, paid consequences. He's lost gigs because of it, but he likes to sort of dress like a rebel, and so he has a long beard and long hair, and he's not really a good fit for some of the really corporate audiences that might otherwise hire him based on his content, but he doesn't care. He says, "You know what? I'm not going to wear a suit for you. Too bad." And depending on your company, you may or may not be able to get away with that. But you can have personal flair in terms of how you dress. You can be known for for certain interests. I mean, you were known. Some people think your personal brand is, literally like just what you say about yourself, but it's so much more than that. It's about, things like, who do you associate with? How do you spend your time? Maybe your brand is you're the really charitable person, and so you're constantly doing volunteer projects for local nonprofits. That's a great brand to have. Maybe it's that you're really involved in the industry. It's like, oh, that James, he's such a connector. He's the president of the such and such association, and he's always hosting networking events. That's a kind of personal branding that could be very valuable and would carry you far, whether you're operating within an agency or on your own.
Yeah, see, actually, what I liked at the very beginning, what you said, I think the name was Scott, the guy.
Scott Stratton, yeah.
I can resonate with him so much because look at me. People think I'm a prisoner. They call me prisoner, or a gangster or whatever, And so it's a good way because actually I'm a walking filter. So from my own experience, whether I wait for a train, for a bus, people around me, I can see people, giving me looks like, those closed mindset looks, not open mind, judgmental looks. It's a good filter for me because I know I'm not going to talk to them. It's a waste of time. Otherwise, if you look like everyone else, you will find out later that they are not really your type of thing. They are not open-minded. Yeah. So it's actually good filter to be different, So I can totally resonate with Scott. Another thing, I'm looking at your book now. I want to know, obviously standout, we just discussed. There are two more things. First one is breakthrough idea that I can see. So basically how to develop your breakthrough idea and build a following around it. So that title stand out. So how do these two parts tie into it? Why would you want to, develop your breakthrough idea? And then how to create a following, and why would you anyway? Because some people are scared to be famous and popular.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note, I mean, again, people don't have to be world famous. If that's your goal, great, go for it. But it's not mandatory for everybody, for sure. The goal is, what I would suggest is to be, I'll call it micro famous. You want to be known in your company, or you want to be known in your community. If you're working in a larger, let's say a digital agency or something like that, you do not want to be so anonymous that when it comes time for layoffs, God forbid, somebody says, "Oh yeah, we have to cut 15% of the budget." Well, let's see. James. I don't even remember who James is. Yeah, I guess we can afford to let him go. I mean, that's not the position you want to be in. You want to stand out for something. And whatever it is. I mean, maybe you're a specialist in a certain type of methodology. Maybe you have a certain stylistic flair that you're known for. Maybe you're known for being really good with certain types of clients. Maybe it's like, oh, James, he's so amazing. Whenever there's a really disgruntled customer, James always makes them happy. So we can't afford to let him go because he's such a good resource. Or maybe you have amazing technical skills. Maybe your aesthetics are so great and you just clean up everybody else's work. Whatever it is, those are all things that you can get known for, to get locally famous for. And that is a reason for people to keep you around, and it's a reason for people to seek you out. And so the breakthrough idea is really just the question of what is it that you want to be known for, and building a following around it. I mean, fantastic if you have, 100,000 Instagram followers or whatever, but even if your following is just that the people in your company know about it, you've got to set your target audience and make sure that the people you want to know who you are and what you're capable of, that they do. Because otherwise, it doesn't matter a lot if you're really talented and no one knows it. You need to make sure the right people know that.
Now, I really loved your concept about the micro following. I hope I have some micro following. Because it could be as small as in agency work. The employees, your boss and some managers are just so in love with you than any other employee. Someone like you said, it's time to get rid of them. You're not going to be the first one. Naturally, the next question that follows is something people constantly discuss. Because basically, when you talk about niching down to stand out, people are like, I'm scared. I'm gonna leave money on the table. It's going to be too narrow niche. But then they say that don't worry about it because you can always expand and grow on that little micro following. You can grow bigger. So how possible is it, and should people even do it, or should they stay in that micro niche with that micro following and stand out inside that little particular community?
Yeah, so I would say that in general, I mean, if you have found a niche that you really love and it's making you enough money and you want to stay there, great, by all means, do it. But I think for most people, it probably gets a little frustrating if that's the only place that you ever are. And so the secret, what I suggest to people, is sometimes people worry about being limited by their niche, that they pick something and then it's like, oh my gosh, I can't escape from this. The trick is to move into adjacent areas. So you have to be strategic about it. So basically what I'm saying is if you decide that you want to be, the preeminent web designer for ballet companies, okay, great, but there's probably not enough to keep you in business, forever. And it's really hard to go from ballet companies to let's say political candidates. Those are two things that seem really far apart. But if you say, all right, I started with ballet companies, but then I can move into chamber orchestras, and then I can move into, from chamber orchestras, I can move into independent movies or whatever, and just, sort of play on the arts theme. That's great. It's about thinking through, how do I move into areas that make sense to other people so that they're not like scratching their heads about why you're doing both things, and also hopefully overlapping areas where maybe the people in one realm have contacts in another realm or can introduce you. Maybe they have common funders or something like that. Maybe there's a foundation that bankrolled one arts organization's website and then they can hire you to do another one. If you can think about those synergies, then it becomes far more possible to expand the niche into something that's meaningful.
Okay. So, okay, good. So you can merge them together. You can expand. You can. Okay. So if you don't, you understand that you can't pay your bills. I had a question. I'm just thinking, how related is it? And maybe you already answered it. Basically, imagine if I have decided to create websites for book authors, but not any book author, only for book authors who create book covers in a yellow color. So after a year of trying hard, I realized I can't pay my bills with that. It's too narrow. But all this year, I've worked so hard to stand out and be known guy to do that. Now I want to get out of it. I want to take another niche. So how possible is it to, I don't know, to change the way you stand out, to clean it up? Aren't people going to be confused at all?
Yeah, I mean, for something like that, if you've branded yourself really distinctively, people might be confused. But there's a couple of ways to think about it. One is you could just broaden it out. You could say, you know what, book authors with yellow book covers is too narrow. Fine, I'm just going to do all book authors. And I think most people would probably they'd see that and they'd say, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. James used to do a narrow, group of book authors. Now he does more. I don't think that's too hard. That being said, if you decide that book authors in general are a terrible market for you and you want to start from scratch, the people who do follow you probably will be confused. But If you have a small enough following, I mean, meaning if you have not been that successful, there's actually not that much risk in switching because maybe you confuse a few people, but not that many. So I think that it's a question of just kind of weighing what sort of a following you've built, and if you feel okay jettisoning that.
Okay, now that's a good point. Yeah, if you're talking about micro niches, then yeah,
Yeah.
you're not gonna confuse the whole world, so to speak.
Yeah. If I mean if you have like 85 Twitter followers or something like that, it's not the end of the world to leave them scratching their heads.
Okay, and so actually, when you mentioned, if your community, if your following is so small, I thought you were about to say about mention words, such words as intimate, close community, personalized, customized. So, do you advise, and what would be the steps to give really personal experience and personal approach to this following? Because maybe it is as small as 100 people that you could perhaps even afford to meet face to face, and maybe
Hmm.
they are kind of big spenders, so you don't have to
Hmm.
sell $10 ebook. You can sell $300 course, and if you create it a few months now and again and all 100 or 95 buy, it could be enough. So maybe you can take it to a whole new level and give them a different kind of experience than what you could give if you had thousands.
Yeah, yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, depending on the size of your audience and the potential purchasing power, I mean, you're absolutely right. You definitely can give them a lot of love. What I discovered in the course of writing Standout is that there's actually a three-step process in terms of building a following around your idea. And the first step is what I call building your network. So specifically, that is in the early days, you want to really focus on getting a tightly knit group around you of people to learn from, supporters, folks that they can almost be a sort of mastermind group. I mean, whether it's a literal one or a metaphorical one, but just people who can give you guidance and support early on to tell you like, oh, okay, James, you're heading in the right direction, or oh, you might want to really rethink this yellow book cover thing. That's a little too narrow. But so that's the first step, is having a trusted network around you. The second is building your audience, which is where you begin communicating your idea to the broader public and seeing if there's interest and seeing how to make connections, sort of raising your hand and saying, hey, I'm out here, I'm available. And you can do that through social media, through blogging, through speaking, just all the ways, maybe it's writing a book, all the ways that you can communicate your idea to a broader audience. And then finally, the third step, once you've begun to get enough penetration in your desired demographic, is you want to start connecting those people together, to turn your audience of people that you've been speaking to individually into a community where they start talking to one another. And once you do that, then that's where you begin to get the snowball potential of your idea going viral, because people begin to say, let's say in the book author community, they say, hey, well, James did my website. Did he do your website? You really need to hire him. And when you get this word of mouth marketing going, particularly for small businesses, but really anywhere, it becomes very, very powerful, very fast.
Yeah, I'm actually really glad that you mentioned this referral word of mouth, because it always kind of, I was very curious what would be the action steps to take, and the people to perhaps particularly choose from, who would be these raving fans who would just pass your message on and on and on. Because it's easy if you're offering free kind of thing, whatever, articles or whatever, all it takes
Yeah.
is click a share button. But now if you are asking money from someone, how do you actually convince him to bring the message on and on and on, to recommend your friends to friends to friends? Because after all, he spent money, so either it has to be something cheap or extremely valuable.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a couple of ways to answer that. One is that, of course, you want to make it easy for them to talk about you. And so there's some structural things that you could do. I mean, one thing that might be useful that a lot of people overlook is literally just in your communications with customers. If you have somebody who like emails you a compliment or something like that, you write back to them and say, "That is so nice. Thank you so much for telling me. Would you be willing to share this on Yelp or whatever the sort of referral site is, because it means a lot in terms of spreading the word." And or the biggest compliment you can give us is to refer your friends. So I'd appreciate it if you'd just keep that in mind. And a lot of times, I mean, people who are not business owners They're really weird and sometimes very stupid about this. And they'll be like, "Oh, really? You want more business? I thought you were so busy you didn't need business." And it's like, "No. Do you understand anything about how capitalism works? Clearly not." But nonetheless, a lot of people just have no idea. And so you have to be really explicit, like, "Wow, please tell people about this." And even just doing that can actually really juice word of mouth in a significant way. Another way you can make it easy for them to talk about you is to give them good excuses to talk about you. So this is where if you have little gifts that you can send to your best customers, or if your company periodically wants to have events to bring them together, that's the kind of thing that prompts people to talk about you. It's like, "Oh, where did you get that basket of brownies?" "Oh, well, my web guy sent it to me. He's fantastic. You should use him." That gets it going.
Yeah, I actually liked how you mentioned how other people would think, Um, I thought, you're booked, you have business going, you seem, a big and valuable company. And that's, I think, one of the fears, because obviously asking for something is a sign of vulnerability, even though the thanks to what's her name, Brené Brown, I think, the
Yes.
power of vulnerability, people start to understand it, But so when I first time heard about this concept, I was also like, man, why would I have to ask? I wouldn't seem as valuable, I would seem as needy. I mean, about to go out of business, come on, recommend me someone, give me some business. It's like I can't get my own customers. So is that fear even, real?
I think a lot of people exaggerate it in their heads because the key is, you're not doing some high pressure thing. I think some people imagine that it has to be high pressure. Like, at the end of our conversation, I say, "So James, I really enjoyed being on your podcast. Can you give me the names of 3 other podcasters that you're willing to introduce me to in the next 48 hours?" And you're just like, whoa, wait a minute. I don't know. I mean, that's the kind of thing that leaves people feeling bad because they it stresses them out. But if you just lob it out there, like no pressure. It's not like they have to do anything. They just have to think about it. You can say, "James, I really loved talking to you on the podcast. I have this new book out called Stand Out, and I'm always looking for ways to spread the word about it. If you happen to have friends that are podcasters that you think I might be a fit for, or they mention to you that they're looking for good guests, I would really appreciate it if you kept me in mind and maybe connected us at some point." Like, that feels pretty different. You can just be like, "Oh, okay, Dorie," and then you can do it. You can not do it based on what you want, but at least you're aware that I am, quote unquote, looking for business, whereas otherwise you might not have been.
Yeah, that's a good example. Everything that sounds and looks and feels authentic, shouldn't be afraid of it. You can even make the most natural, I guess, natural and authentic things sound pressurized. So
Yeah.
it is really, how you make the person you're asking to perceive the question you're asking to. So that's a good point. Yeah. We are about to actually hit the end of the road for this episode. So obviously, my question to you personally would be, what are your next plans? How you are planning to stand out?
Yes. Well, one of my ways that I'm planning to stand out, I decided to do a little midnight surprise recently. So in addition to my to my new book Stand Out, I actually released a secret ebook that I wrote. It just came out about a week ago, and it's called Stand Out Networking. That's available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. It's just a little book. It's like 60 pages. It's like $4, but it's kind of a follow on, and it's a compilation of my best advice about networking. So that's been one way that I figured if people discovered me for Stand Out and they enjoyed it, they might want to read something else fast. So I wrote something there. But the other thing that I'll just mention for your listeners too, if they're interested in this concept of how to stand out, how to come up with their big ideas and how to spread them, I have a free giveaway on my website, which is dorieclark.com. It's DORIECLARK.com. And it is a 42-page workbook that I created based on Stand Out so that they can literally walk through the process themselves. So I hope they might check that out.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that. And of course, I believe that people will even share this, first of all, because it's free, But then even when I spend money, buy your book, when I'll read, well, I hope I'm not going to be disappointed by the sounds of our conversation. There should be some goodies and value in it. People, should be even sharing your book as well. And by the feeling of it and by how much I know our audience, they should enjoy this episode as well, and I believe they will ask me to get you on the show, back on the show. So would you be interested at all to do another episode at some point in the future?
I would love to. Thank you, James.
Lovely, thank you. And I guess we all learned a lesson or two how to stand out, and I'm gonna go back and reconsider how else I'm gonna stand out. One thing I realized, that my yellow background is not as bright as your book, so perhaps that's the lesson number one. Apart from that, thank you very much for being here, and I'm looking forward to the next time. Thank you.
Thanks, take care.